Hello everyone, and welcome back to Timeless Drama Stories. Before we begin today's story, I want to check in with you. How are you feeling today? I hope you're doing well, wherever you are in the world. Take a moment for yourself right now. Go ahead and pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea, something warm and comforting. You deserve this time to relax and listen. Get comfortable, because today's story is a long one, and it's quite heavy. But I promise you, by the end, there's light. I'm Margaret, and I'm 73 years old now. What I'm about to share with you happened when I was much younger, but the weight of it has stayed with me my entire life. This is the story of how my mother tried to sell me into what she called a respectable marriage, and how I discovered that respectability can hide the darkest of sins. I stopped eating when I was 16. Not because I hated my body, though my mother told everyone I did. Not because I wanted to be thin, though that's what the girls at school whispered. I stopped eating because I had figured out something terrifying. In my mother's social circle, the thinner you were, the longer you could delay what they called your introduction to society. And I knew exactly what that introduction meant. You see, I grew up in a very specific world. My father had died when I was 12, leaving my mother with a crumbling textile factory in Manchester and debts that kept her awake at night. I could hear her pacing the hallways, the floorboards creaking under her worry. But instead of selling the factory or finding work herself, my mother had another plan entirely. She began attending church socials, charity galas, garden parties, any place where wealthy widowers and their adult sons might be. I remember the exact moment I understood what was happening. I was 14, sitting in the parlor, when Mrs. Blackwood came for tea. She was bragging about her daughter Catherine's engagement to a Mr. Harold Preston, a man of 45. Catherine was 17. The age difference is actually ideal, Mrs. Blackwood said, stirring sugar into her tea. Younger wives are more malleable, more grateful, and Harold is quite comfortable financially. Catherine will want for nothing. My mother's eyes had lit up in a way that made my stomach turn. How wonderful for Catherine, she'd said. Margaret will be of age soon as well. That night, I heard my mother on the telephone. Yes, she's 14 now, she was saying. Excellent health, good breeding, quiet disposition. She'll make a fine wife when the time comes. Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet? Have you ever realized that the person you trusted most in the world saw you not as a daughter, but as a solution to a problem? 2 years passed. I watched as Catherine Blackwood married Mr. Preston. I watched as other girls in our social circle, one by one, were paired with men 2 or 3 times their age. And I noticed something else. The girls who developed early, who became women in body before they were ready, were the first ones to be married off. So I stopped eating. At first, it was just skipping breakfast, then lunch, then dinner became a few bites pushed around my plate. My body, in its wisdom, understood what my mind was trying to do. My monthly cycle, which had just started at 15, stopped entirely. I became thin, angular, boyish. And my mother, for a brief time, stopped bringing eligible men to tea. But mothers like mine don't give up easily. On the morning of my 17th birthday, she came into my room with a dress I'd never seen before. It was pale blue silk, far too expensive for our actual circumstances, with a neckline that seemed far too low. Put this on, she said. We're having a guest for lunch. Who? I asked, though I already felt dread pooling in my stomach. Mr. Richard Hartley. He's a business associate of the family, and he's been very generous in his offers to help with the factory. I knew that name. Richard Hartley was 52 years old, a shipping magnate who had built his fortune through methods that polite society chose not to examine too closely. He'd been married 2 before. His first wife had died in childbirth at 19. His second wife had died 5 years later under circumstances that were never quite explained. The official story was pneumonia, but I'd overheard the servants talking about bruises, about visits from the doctor, about screaming in the night. I'm not feeling well, I said. Perhaps I should stay in bed. My mother's hand cracked across my face so fast I didn't see it coming. You will put on this dress, you will come downstairs, and you will be charming. Do you understand me? The factory is 3 months from foreclosure. Mr. Hartley has offered to clear all our debts and provide a generous settlement. All he asks in return is a young wife. I'm 17, I whispered. Catherine Preston was 17. The Whitmore girl was 16. You're lucky, Margaret. You're getting old. That's when I understood that my mother didn't see me at all. She saw a transaction, a way out of debt, a business deal wrapped in white lace and vows. Lunch was exactly as horrible as I'd feared. Mr. Hartley was a large man, red-faced and heavy-handed. He sat too close to me at the table. His hand kept finding reasons to touch mine, to brush my arm, to rest on my knee beneath the tablecloth. When I tried to move away, my mother's sharp look pinned me in place. Margaret is quite accomplished, my mother was saying. She plays piano, she speaks French, she's been educated in all the domestic arts. Does she now? Mr. Hartley's voice was thick, his eyes traveling over me in a way that made my skin crawl. And is she biddable? Obedient? I've had quite enough of willful women. I thought of his second wife, dead at 24. I thought of the bruises the servants had whispered about. Extremely obedient, my mother said, as if I wasn't even there. She understands duty. After lunch, I excused myself and ran to my room. I locked the door and sat with my back against it, trying to breathe. That's when I heard my mother and Mr. Hartley talking in the hallway below my window. The girl is quite thin, Mr. Hartley was saying, sickly looking. When did she last have her monthly courses? Oh, that's just her age, my mother lied smoothly. She's a late bloomer, but I assure you, she's quite healthy. The wedding can be arranged for 6 months from now. That should give her time to fill out a bit. 6 months is too long. I'll give you 3. And I want her checked by my personal physician before any contracts are signed. I won't pay for damaged goods. I felt bile rise in my throat. Damaged goods. That's what I was to them. A product to be inspected and purchased. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about those 2 dead wives, about what duty would mean in Mr. Hartley's house, about the fact that I was 17 years old and my entire future was being sold for the price of factory debts. The next morning, my mother presented me with what she called wonderful news. The engagement was official. Mr. Hartley had already paid off half the debt as a show of good faith. The wedding would be in 3 months. I was to begin preparing immediately. You should be grateful, she said. Girls like you, in our position, don't get many chances. Mr. Hartley is willing to overlook your difficult years, your thinness, your moodiness. He sees potential in you. I thought about my options. I was 17 with no money, no relatives who would take me in, no prospects. Running away would mean poverty, danger, possibly worse than what I faced at home. But staying meant becoming the 3rd Mrs. Hartley, and I couldn't shake the image of those 2 previous wives, both dead before their 25th birthdays. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been trapped? Have you ever felt like every door was locked, every window barred, and the only way out was through fire? The preparations began immediately. My mother hired a dressmaker for my trousseau, though we couldn't afford it. She scheduled appointments with Mr. Hartley's physician, who examined me in ways that made me feel violated and small. She brought me to tea with other married women who spoke in hushed tones about wifely duties and enduring with grace. I met Mrs. Elizabeth Thornton at one of those teas. She was perhaps 45, with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. She was a widow who ran a small charity helping women in difficult circumstances. She watched me throughout the tea, and when I excused myself to the ladies' room, she followed. Forgive me, she said, but I recognized the look in your eyes. I had the same look 30 years ago. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there. This thin, trembling thing in an expensive dress I hadn't chosen. Are you being forced into this marriage? She asked quietly. The dam broke. I told her everything. About the debts, about Mr. Hartley's dead wives, about how my mother saw me as a business transaction. Mrs. Thornton listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she handed me a card. This is my address, she said. If you need help, if you need a place to go, you come to me. Anytime, day or night. Do you understand? I took the card with shaking hands and hid it in my shoe. The weeks passed like a slow drowning. Mr. Hartley became a frequent visitor to our house. He brought me gifts, expensive things, jewelry, perfume, books I never asked for. He insisted on taking me for walks in the garden, where his hands would grip my waist too tightly, where his breath would be hot on my neck as he described his plans for our marriage. I'll expect children right away, he told me one afternoon. At least 4 or 5. I need heirs, you understand. My previous wives were disappointments in that regard. I thought about his first wife, dead in childbirth at 19. I thought about the second wife who might have been pregnant when she died. Disappointments. That's what he called them. But worse than Mr. Hartley were the moments when he thought I couldn't hear him talking to my mother. I was coming down the stairs one evening when I heard him in the study. I've had the girl investigated, he was saying. She's been starving herself, probably trying to prevent her courses, thinking it would save her from marriage. Clever little thing, but foolish. Once she's mine, I'll have her on a strict diet. She'll be properly fed and bedded. If she continues to resist, well, I have methods. She'll adjust, my mother said. All girls do. Your daughter needs to understand something. His voice turned cold. In my house, defiance is not tolerated. My previous wives learned that lesson. One way or another. I sat on the stairs, my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. He knew about his wives. He was essentially admitting to hurting them, possibly killing them, and my mother didn't care. That night, I made my decision. I would run. I waited until everyone was asleep. I packed a small bag with just the essentials, a change of clothes, the few pounds I'd managed to save from household money, and Mrs. Thornton's card. I wrote no note. What would I say? Sorry, I can't be sold to your murdering friend. I climbed out my bedroom window just after midnight, using the trellis the same way I had as a child when I wanted to stargaze. The streets were dark and dangerous, but less dangerous than staying. I walked the 3 miles to Mrs. Thornton's address, my heart pounding the entire way. She answered the door in her nightgown, took one look at me, and pulled me inside. Thank God, she whispered. I've been worried sick. Come in, child. You're safe now. Have you ever felt safety after being in danger for so long? It's overwhelming. I collapsed on her sofa and cried for what felt like hours. Mrs. Thornton didn't ask questions that night. She simply gave me food, a warm bed, and locked doors between me and the world. But the next morning, she sat me down at her kitchen table with tea and toast. Tell me everything, she said. And I mean everything. Not just about Mr. Hartley, but about his wives. Everything you know or suspect. So I did. I told her about the first wife's death in childbirth, which everyone had accepted as tragic but natural. I told her about the second wife's mysterious pneumonia, the bruises, the late-night visits from doctors. I told her about the servants' gossip, about how they'd been dismissed immediately after the second wife's death, about how the house had been thoroughly cleaned before any authorities could investigate. Mrs. Thornton's face grew graver with each detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Margaret, she finally said, I need to tell you something. I run a charity. Yes, but it's not just any charity. We help women escape dangerous situations, forced marriages, violent husbands, human trafficking disguised as matrimony. And over the years, I've heard Mr. Hartley's name more than once. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? 3 women have come through my organization with stories about Mr. Hartley. Not his wives, but young women from poor families who were promised to him and managed to escape before the marriages were finalized. All of them told similar stories: violent tempers, obsessive control, and veiled threats about what happened to women who disappointed him. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? I asked. If 3 women have reported him, because he's wealthy, Margaret, because he makes generous donations to the Police Benevolent Society, because his business interests employ half the magistrates in Manchester, and because young women from poor families aren't believed when they speak against respectable men. I felt the familiar weight of helplessness settling over me. So there's nothing to be done. He'll just keep doing this. I didn't say that. Mrs. Thornton's eyes had a steel in them I hadn't seen before. I said he hasn't been stopped yet, but that doesn't mean he can't be. Margaret, how would you feel about helping me stop him? How? I asked. I'm just a 17-year-old girl with no money and no power. My own mother won't listen to me, but you have something more valuable than money or power. You have access. You were inside his plan. You know the pattern. And more importantly, you're willing to fight. Let me ask you this. When you're drowning and someone throws you a rope, do you question the rope? Or do you grab hold and let it pull you to shore? Mrs. Thornton's plan was risky but simple. I would publicly refuse the marriage and state my reasons why. Not just I don't want to marry him, but specific accusations about his treatment of his previous wives. It would cause a scandal, yes, but scandals could be useful. They made people ask questions. They made authorities investigate things they'd previously ignored. He'll sue you for slander, Mrs. Thornton warned. Your mother will likely disown you. Society will call you hysterical, a liar, a girl who's trying to escape her duty. It will be brutal. But it might save other girls, I said. It might make people ask questions about how his wives really died. It might, she agreed. Are you brave enough? I thought about those 2 dead women. I thought about the 3 who had escaped. I thought about all the future girls who might be lined up after me if someone didn't stop him. Yes, I said. I'm brave enough. We spent 3 days preparing. Mrs. Thornton contacted a journalist she knew, a woman named Clara Pemberton, who specialized in stories about women's rights and social reform. Clara was skeptical at first, but when I told her everything I knew, when Mrs. Thornton produced statements from the 3 women who had escaped, her eyes lit up with the fire of someone who'd found a real story. This is bigger than one forced marriage, Clara said. This is about a system that allows wealthy men to essentially buy young wives and then dispose of them when they become inconvenient. If we can prove Mr. Hartley harmed his previous wives, we can open investigations into dozens of similar cases. Can you prove it, though? I asked. Everyone accepted that his wives died of natural causes. That's because no one was asking the right questions, Clara said. But I know a doctor who was suspicious about the second wife's death. He wasn't the attending physician, but he saw the body at the funeral. He noted bruising that didn't match a pneumonia diagnosis. If we can get him to testify, if we can get the servants who were dismissed to talk, if we can make enough noise that the authorities have to investigate. It was a slim hope, but it was hope nonetheless. The confrontation happened on what should have been my final dress fitting, 2 weeks before the wedding. My mother had arranged for Mr. Hartley to be there, to see me in my wedding gown. Instead, he saw me walk in with Mrs. Thornton, Clara Pemberton, and a police constable, Mrs. Thornton, had managed to convince to come. Margaret! My mother's face went white. What is the meaning of this? Where have you been? We've been searching for you for days. I've been somewhere safe, I said. My voice shook, but I kept going. And I'm here to tell you that I will not be marrying Mr. Hartley. Not now, not ever. Mr. Hartley stood up, his face darkening. Young lady, you're making a grave mistake. Think about your mother, about your family's reputation. I'm thinking about your previous wives, I said loudly, clearly, so everyone in the shop could hear. I'm thinking about the first Mrs. Hartley, who died in childbirth at 19. I'm thinking about the second Mrs. Hartley, who died of pneumonia at 24 but had bruises on her body that no one questioned. I'm thinking about the 3 other young women who were promised to you and managed to escape before becoming wife number 3 or 4. The shop went silent. My mother looked like she might faint. Mr. Hartley's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Those are slanderous lies, he said. I loved my wives. Their deaths were tragedies. Then you won't mind an investigation, Clara Pemberton said, stepping forward. I'm a journalist, Mr. Hartley, and I've been researching you quite thoroughly. I've spoken to servants who worked in your house. I've spoken to the doctor who examined your second wife's body. I've documented a pattern of violence and control that ended in the deaths of 2 young women. The public has a right to know. Mr. Hartley lunged toward me, but the constable stepped between us. That's close enough, sir, he said. Miss Margaret here has made some serious allegations. I think we need to have a conversation at the station. She's hysterical, Mr. Hartley snarled. A lying, ungrateful little girl who's been filling her head with nonsense. None of those women will testify against me. None of those servants will speak. I've made sure of it. Made sure? The constable's eyebrows rose. How exactly did you make sure, Mr. Hartley? And that's when Mr. Hartley made his fatal mistake. In his anger, in his arrogance, he said exactly the wrong thing. I paid them well enough to keep quiet, just like I paid off that meddling doctor. Just like I'll pay to make this ridiculous accusation disappear. Trying to bribe witnesses, paying people to conceal evidence, He'd just confessed to obstruction of justice in front of witnesses. The constable's face hardened. Mr. Hartley, I think you need to come with me right now. We have a lot to discuss. What happened next is still, even 50 years later, hard to fully process. Mr. Hartley was arrested. The investigation that followed was extensive and horrifying. The servants talked once they realized he could no longer threaten them. The doctor provided his original notes about the second wife's suspicious injuries. Most damning of all, they exhumed the body of the second Mrs. Hartley and found evidence of arsenic poisoning. The trial lasted 3 months. I had to testify, to stand in front of a courtroom full of people, and describe what Mr. Hartley had said to me, how he'd touched me, the threats he'd made. It was humiliating and terrifying. The defense attorneys called me every name you can imagine: liar, attention seeker, hysteric, ungrateful daughter. But in the end, the evidence was overwhelming. Richard Hartley was convicted of murdering his second wife and sentenced to life in prison. The death of his first wife was ruled suspicious, but not conclusively proven as murder, though most people believed he'd deliberately gotten her pregnant, knowing she was too young and frail to survive childbirth. As for my mother, she never forgave me. She lost the factory anyway, because Mr. Hartley's arrest meant his financial support disappeared. She spent the rest of her days in a small cottage, living on charity, telling anyone who would listen that I had destroyed her life. Perhaps I did, but I saved my own. Mrs. Thornton took me in permanently. She legally became my guardian, and when I turned 18, she helped me find work as a clerk in a law office. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that I'd earned myself. I wasn't anyone's commodity. I wasn't for sale. More importantly, the case opened up investigations into dozens of other similar marriages. Clara Pemberton's articles sparked a public outcry that led to stricter regulations around marriage contracts, better protections for young women, and increased scrutiny of society marriages between very young women and much older men. I never married, not because I was afraid of marriage itself, but because I never found anyone I trusted enough. And that's all right. I've had a full life, a meaningful life. I worked my way up to become a legal secretary, then a paralegal. I helped Mrs. Thornton with her charity for 40 years, until she passed away. I helped hundreds of women escape situations like mine. Now, here's something I want you to think about, and this is important. How many girls in your life, in your community, in your family, might be facing something like this? Not necessarily as dramatic as being sold to a murderer, but being pushed into choices they don't want, being told their wishes don't matter, being treated like their only value is in who they marry or what they can provide to others. I'm 73 years old now, and I still see it happening. The details change, the social contexts shift, but the fundamental problem remains. Some people still see young women as commodities to be traded for social advantage or financial gain. There's a postscript to this story that I think you should know. 2 years ago, I received a letter. It was from a young woman named Sophie, 25 years old, who had been researching her family history. She'd discovered that her great-grandmother was Mr. Hartley's first wife, the one who died in childbirth at 19. Sophie had questions about what really happened. She'd heard family rumors that her great-grandmother's death wasn't as natural as the official story claimed. She'd found newspaper clippings about my case and wondered if I could tell her the truth about the man who had been her great-grandfather. So I met with Sophie. I told her everything I knew. I told her that yes, her great-grandmother had likely been deliberately put at risk by a man who cared more about having heirs than about the life of his teenage wife. I told her that her great-grandmother was probably scared, probably alone, probably knew she was too young to safely carry a child, but had no power to refuse. Sophie cried. Then she did something remarkable. She wrote a book about her great-grandmother, about me, about all of Mr. Hartley's victims. She wrote about the systemic failures that had allowed him to destroy so many lives. She wrote about the women who fought back. The book came out last year. It's called The Price of Respectability. I have a signed copy on my shelf. Sophie dedicated it to Margaret and all the women who refused to be sold. So let me ask you one final question, and I want you to really think about this. What will you do when you see someone being treated as less than human? When you see someone being bought, sold, controlled, or forced into something against their will? Will you look away because it's not your business? Or will you be brave enough to throw them a rope? Because I promise you, someone in your life needs that rope. Someone is drowning right now, and they're waiting for someone to care enough to help. I survived because Mrs. Elizabeth Thornton cared enough to give a frightened 17-year-old girl a card with an address on it. I survived because Clara Pemberton cared enough to risk her reputation to tell the truth. I survived because one constable cared enough to listen when a young woman made accusations against a powerful man. You can be that person for someone else. You can be the reason someone survives. Thank you for listening to my story today. I know it was a heavy one. Take care of yourselves, dear friends. And if this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it. Sometimes, knowing that someone else survived is enough to give us the courage to fight our own battles. Until next time, this is Margaret, reminding you that you are never just a commodity. You are never just someone else's solution to a problem. You are a full human being, deserving of respect, dignity, and the right to choose your own path. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.